Joe Bob Briggs. So Joe Bob Briggs earlier this year came out of his movie television hosting retirement to host a marathon of movies on the streaming service Shudder, the last drive-in, and that was a big success, as Joe Bob and other people would say, broke the internet. There were a lot of problems with the streaming because it was just so much overwhelming demand for it, and it was a great show. Joe Bob firing on all cylinders. Joe Bob was back, and now Joe Bob has returned for another marathon in November 2018, the Thanksgiving-themed Joe Bob Briggs Last Drive-In Dinners of Death, a marathon of four movies with kind of dinner themes. I mean, great special. Again, it's just Joe Bob firing on all cylinders. We start off with, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what Joe Bob Briggs described as the best movie ever made. It's pretty much anything you'd ever want to learn about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He goes through extensive bios on all the actors. He does an incredible eulogy to Tobe Hooper. He talks about, I mean, he really gets detail in everything. I think about the only actor, or I mean crew member really, he didn't get really totally detailed on was Bob Burns. Robert A. Burns, the guy who designed Leatherface's mask, designed all the bones and everything, and also worked on the second movie in the marathon. He goes into a little bit of that, but I mean, he did talk about where Bob Burns lived. He talked about Seguin. I mean, he goes into the whole thing, man. He goes into, I mean, it's really anything you'd ever want to know about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in the host segments to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre there. And of course, we start off the show with one of the signature Joe Bob Briggs rants about the origins of Thanksgiving, and it was wonderful in those circular Joe Bob Briggs rants about it was where you learn something but you learn nothing. It was one of those funny things where he's got a map and he's pointing to the map, and it really brought back Monster Vision to me. Monster Vision and the movie channel, the Lost Drive-In, the early years in the 80s and the early 90s there. Oh my God, really, I mean, this special, it seemed like, I don't know, it just felt like to me that the host segments were a lot longer than in than in the last drive-in and another thing. I mean, Joe Bob Briggs does have a tendency to kind of rant and go off on tangents, but it seemed like this show, and it started out with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he was like a free-form jazz artist, horror host. I mean, he was just going left and right, but you don't know how much of that is just like the pure improv, and then how much of it is pre-planned. Because, I mean, it seems Joe Bob does a very good job of making the show feel live, making the show feel like, I mean, I'm sure it's live to tape in some sense. I think it felt like there were some cuts when he does like the drive-in totals and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when he's going over the cast. There was a moment where it seemed like there was a cut. It was almost an invisible cut. I mean, they were coming from one camera to another, but it seemed like I mean, maybe Joe Bob ran off or went on a rant or blew a take. I wonder how many takes, I mean, he does with these. I mean, it can't be just one take. He has to do more. He has to do multiples, I would assume. But I don't know. But it really felt loose and freeform, whether that was, movie magic or really just Joe Bob going on tangents. It felt a little more looser than usual, but a loose Joe Bob is still great. I mean, I mean, it made the show even more special. So, an incredible eulogy on Tobe Hooper, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, movie 1. Movie 2 was The Hills Have Eyes, and he goes on about Wes Craven. It started off with talking about Last House on the Left, and it surprised me. It was like he called it what did he call it? Brutal failure of a movie? Last House on the Left? I didn't know Joe Bob didn't like Last House on the Left. I don't know. Maybe that's I'm not thinking here, but Joe Bob Briggs doesn't like Last House on the Left? And that's surprising. Is Last House on the Left like Joe Bob Briggs what Blue Velvet is to Roger Ebert? I don't know. I mean, it just seems like he couldn't look. I don't know. Maybe he finds it too primitive. I don't know. That surprised me when Joe Bob Briggs was putting down Last House on the Left and then talking about Wes Craven's, adventures in adult film. And by the way, I do have a little a clip from a Wes Craven film where he acted in, and it was a different type of movie. It's on the channel here. Wes Craven in a movie playing a photographer. I have it on the channel, the Pulsing Cinema channel here. Do a little search for Wes Craven and you'll be surprised. But yeah, Wes Craven was involved in adult film in many unknown capacities. And but again, a great rundown of Wes Craven's career and where he's coming from, and interviews an interview with Michael Berryman. He brought Michael Berryman on the stage, and I mean Michael Berryman, one of the nicest guys. I mean, he just rate everybody. I know a few people who've met Michael Berryman, who've met him at shows, and he'll take the time to talk to you. I mean, even if you're not buying anything from him, you can just sit down with him. I knew my friend Mike. He just had like lunch with him. He just sat down with Michael Berryman and started having lunch with him. I mean, just at he just had like a plate of food and just eating with him. It's very nice. I mean, he seems like a very, and his kindness and his enthusiasm and his energy just radiates. Any interview you see with Michael Berryman, he's just a class act, and he gives some nice little details. I didn't know Michael Berryman was in The Crow, and he was cut out. It was very interesting. And I mean, great. Dead or Alive, the Takashi, and so movie 2, Hills Have Eyes. Movie 3, Dead or Alive, Takashi Miike. I've tried in the couple days since Thanksgiving to watch this marathon. I always end up watching the host segments for Dead or Alive. Like, I'll stop and start, and I'll be in the middle of the night, and I'm like, what is this movie? It is a WTF movie. Takashi Miike all over the map, and the host segments with Joe Bob Briggs are all over the map, talking about Japanese culture and his rant on probiotics at the beginning, and it's just great. Finishing the marathon out was and a little, and by the way, in Dead or Alive, there's a little call-in segment with Felissa Rose. That was nice. That was sweet. And of course, ending with the Thanksgiving themed slasher film Blood Rage. Oh man, talking about Louise Lasser and a Joe Bob Briggs rant on restored DVDs and Blu-rays. That's interesting. Where he rants and raves about forgotten classics which are being re-released on Blu-ray and DVD. Almost seems like he's ranting and raving against Blood Rage. That he's angry that he didn't know that he never watched Blood Rage before, and now it's been coming out as a classic. And Blood Rage really was a forgotten movie. I mean, there were a couple of real slasher scholars who knew about it, and I bought it on DVD years ago when it was something The Shadow Woods, Nightmare at Shadow Woods or whatever. It was like a public, like not a public domain DVD, but a real low rent DVD version of it. Now it's come out through Arrow in this just incredible special edition, and it's winding its way throughout the streaming services. So I mean, it was great that Joe Bob featured it. I mean, the whole special was really great. The sets were, I think, really well done. The last drive-in set was like really sad. It was like Joe Bob Briggs in one room. It felt like the early years of the movie channel, where it was just like Dumont, and it felt like Joe Bob Briggs in retirement in a little like crappy, one room apartment or something. And the sets of the Dinners of Death, they feel more like Monster Vision, in that you have the Airstream trailer set, the exterior, and then you have what I guess is supposed to be the interior of the trailer. And so the opening segments for the chainsaw take place outside, and he goes inside for the rest of the segments, kind of like Monster Vision, where it was like the main movie was hosted outside, and there was Joe Bob's last call. He'd go inside and host some movies from the interior set, what was supposed to be the interior, and then the exterior Airstream was reserved for the A movie, so to speak. But I mean, and even the video quality, I think, looked better. I think it was, I don't know if it was as much as the video quality, but I think it was better lit. And I think the last drive-in, was shot in New York. I don't think it was shot in Texas, on a set in Texas, but it was shot on a set in New York. Now, Dinners of Death was shot in Dallas in a studio. And the Galaxy Drive-In, I think that's where he shot the opening sequence of Dinners of Death, and there's some like B-roll and some shots at the very end in the credits. And the Galaxy Drive-In is credited. The Galaxy Drive-In in Ennis, Texas. I think it's just south of Dallas, so I'm sure that was probably the closest to the closest drive-in to the shooting location, the set of Dinners of Death. So I'm sure that's why they chose to shoot there. If you're in Austin, by the way, and you want to go to a drive-in, the Stars and Stripes in New Braunfels, Texas, I think that's where you need to go. Austin does have what we call an urban drive-in. We have this new thing, but it's like for hipsters in downtown Austin, and I mean, if you want to go there, I mean, if you enjoy it, if you're in downtown Austin, you don't want to leave, because you got to drive like an hour to go to New Braunfels. But it's worth it, because that is one of the best drive-ins I've ever been at. The New Braunfels, Stars and Stripes are, oh my God, incredible. I have some videos about it on my channel. Oh, incredible. If we get Joe Bob Briggs to the New Braunfels, that would be like my head would explode like something out of Scanners. Because the New Braunfels drive-in it's not like low rent, it's like all paved. It's like a drive-in out of the 60s. It's modern and new. It's only a few years old. But I don't know, maybe Joe Bob likes the lower end drive-ins, because the Galaxy Drive-In, where they shot the opening of Dinners of Death, it's like most modern drive-ins that have, it's just like dirt and rubble, and it's not paved and everything. But the New Braunfels Drive-In is shiny and like brand new, and an incredible experience. If you ever want to go drive-in and you're in the Austin, Texas area, it is worth your time and money to drive out there and get the experience. It's such a fun experience. The drive-in will never die. So I'm excited about Joe Bob's Christmas marathon, his Christmas-themed December marathon, because I think the Dinners of Death went off without a hitch. Incredible, in like free-form jazz, improvisational, lots of ranting and raving, and with nice long host segments, and just a wonderful show. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, people are still discovering the last drive-in, the summer special, because I mean, it's kind of winding its way. It was such a long show. I mean, it was over like a day, a day and a half, it seemed. It was like a long list of movies. But I mean, there was some real classics like Pieces and The Prowler and Tourist Trap and Reanimator, and oh my God, on and on and on and on and on. Daughters of Darkness. Basket Case. Incredible series of films, and people are still kind of catching on to Joe Bob and the last drive-in, and I hope in the next couple of months people keep catching on. And I really wish, Joe Bob, you could do this. I think you could do this thing as a monthly or a weekly show with just one movie. It doesn't have to be a gigantic marathon. I mean, Joe Bob, okay, that's one of his great rants at the beginning of Blood Rage. Again, another one of his great rants about which is based on an article that he wrote for Takis Mag about how people, the congregate, people love movie theaters, but there's the communal aspect of it, the congregation, the fellowship, the sharing in a shared singular vision. I get that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I would agree with that, and I love and Joe Bob. You could tell in the show he fosters it, this idea, this feeling. Even though, of course, this special was taped a couple months ago, because Joe Bob was in town here in Austin hosting Dead Heat at the Draft House. He was in San Antonio. He hosted a live show of Basket Case, and he visited the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sites here a couple months ago. So I'm sure I knew that he's filming the special. I had this idea, but he fosters this idea throughout the show that it's live, that it's actually that's not taped, that it's actually happening as you're watching it. You're all watching it together. It's a good feeling. It's a good vibe, and Joe Bob is very talented at playing that. Making it play as if you're actually watching the thing play out in front of you live. And it always begs the question to me, could he do the show live? Could you do it live? What would be the technical obstacles in doing that? But I think the only way you could really get a Joe Bob live show is to actually see him in person, see his special, see him host a movie in person, or see how the Rednecks Saved Hollywood, his little one-man presentation on the Redneck movies, which is kind of winding around, still kind of winding around. He's still doing shows. So Joe Bob Briggs, if you can see him live, go see him. If you want to go to a drive-in in Austin, go to the Stars and Stripes. It's the closest, it's the best, it's the nicest. And watch Dinners of Death, watch The Last Drive-In, watch the December Marathon. Excellent.